Well, hello everyone. This is about my 22nd tape. And you guys aren't even a tough audience. At one point I had this when I first started. Now that's a tough audience. Look, breathing down your throat, your back or your neck. Breathing down your neck. See, I can't even get that right today. Just hang with me, guys. It's been a crazy morning. So anyway, my title lesson is Open His Spiritual Eyes. We're going to see a Bible character in this lesson that's going to have his eyes opened. And but I do want to start first with something. You guys all remember these. Some of the youngins won't remember them, but they were 3D pictures. They were 3D illusion pictures. They were dimensional. And actually, you'd have to stare at it, and then you could see the picture eventually, which I didn't see very often. Far and few between. But Dale, he was always good at it, and he saw this one. He saw it right away. But he said it's like you have to look at it at a different dimension. That's what we're going to see today in our story. It kind of goes with seeing something in a different dimension, but we're going to see it in a spiritual dimension. The main characters in this Bible story is Elijah the prophet. We have his servant, the king of Israel, and the king of Syria. We're in 2 Kings chapter 6. Verses 8 through 23. Actually, I probably could read it by just memory because I've read it so many times. But anyway, and that's a good thing. You can never overread the Bible, right? Right. Okay. So let me start with we're in chapter 6, verse 8. Now the king of Syria was making war against Israel. And he took counsel with his servants, saying, my camp will be in such and such place. So here we see that the king of Syria is going to have war with Israel. So here we go again. They're always getting into battles with somebody. But it's, only because of their own disobedience. That's for sure. But he says, let me read this up. Yes, in my camp. He's going to set up a camp in there, and he's going to settle down because he plans on having this war. Verse 9. And the man of God sent to the king of Israel, saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are coming down there. So in this verse, the man of God is Elijah, and what he did, he sent some intel, a divine message, a download to Israel's king. That download came from the Lord God. And he's telling him, hey, he's stating to the guys, look, stay away from such and such place because the Syrian army, they are coming, and they're going to be camping out. The commentary that I like, Enduring Word, had stated that Elijah was no longer a dreaded adversary to the king of Israel, because Elijah wasn't in, he was upset with them because they had got away from God, definitely. But now he was becoming the king's trusted, guidance counselor, more or less. But the eyes of the Syrian king, Elijah was going to become a quick arch enemy here. But we have to remember that Elijah, like I said, he was a prophet, and he would get downloads from God. And it would be in his knower, and he would know what would happen before it happened. And that's a great asset to have. He would have someone he was someone that you would definitely want on your team. Just like the Bible, what's playing out in our today's times is in sync with what was told by the prophets all through the Bible 2,000 years ago. That's why the whole Bible, both old and new, is true. And really, the proof is in the pudding. Not that the Bible's pudding, but you know what I mean. I like visuals, so you know what I mean. Anyway, now, mind you, Elijah really did not support, like I said earlier, the corruption of the Israelites, and the king. But he also knew the scenario would not be a good scenario if they were taken captive by the Syrians as well. So he had to basically, what did he have to do? He had to weigh the options. Take the lesser versus the worst. May I also say that the Israelites they had spiritually, what had happened is they were spiritually deteriorating in God's eyes. And so in spite of that huge peace, can you see that? That huge peace, what were they doing? God still helped them in what they were doing. He still helped them in their endeavors and their battles. And not all the time, because it's what God wants. Sometimes we learn lessons from those problems and issues that we have in life if we bring it into today's time with us. But he does take care of his own. All right, let's look in verse 10. Then the king of Israel sent someone to the place of which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him, and he was watchful there, not just once or twice. So in verse 10, we not only see him warning him once, but numerous times about the Syrians' whereabouts. They were what? Saved by the bell. That bell came from Catholic Charities. My husband and I both worked there for many years, and we used that as our fire bell. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. We were up on the 3rd floor, and when we heard that bell, we knew we better get out. Okay, sorry about that. They were saved by the bell. I mean, they were saved by God. God gave the info to Elijah, and Elijah passed it on. He was the vehicle and the messenger of God to give to to give all this info to the king. God has his words and his wisdom written down in the Bible, okay, to help us maneuver through life, the ins and outs and the pitfalls of life. We simply sometimes we do this.
I did it my way.
All right, so just like Frank Sinatra, we do it our way as well, don't we? Only to find ourselves saying, I wished I'd have listened. Could have saved a lot of trouble. All right, let's look at verse 11. Therefore, the heart of the king of Syria was greatly troubled by this thing, and he called his servants, and he said to them, will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? So don't you think by now he's really getting upset. He's a little hot under the collar, would you say by now? Yes. This is the only top I had that had a collar on it. Anyway, he was getting very hot under the collar and wondering, how in the world do they know all this? How can they know this information? How does he know this information? Who's the spy in the bunch? But we know, don't we? We know the sovereign God knows. Well, the Syrian king is thinking, I got a spy amidst me. There is a spy. Who's the rat in this bunch? Let's look at verse 12, what they say. And one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elijah, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. Someone finally has the guts to speak up and say, hey, it's that Elijah guy. That's who you want. That's who you're looking for. He's able to hear everything you say, even in your bedroom. Let's look at verse 13. So he said, go and see where he is, that I may send and get him. And it was told him, saying, surely he is in Dothan. The king of Syria gets word. He knows where he's at now. He wastes no time. He wants this spy. He wants him caught, and he wants him caught now. The Bible dictionary said that Dothan means two wells, that name, which are still there to this day, actually. And for history buffs, this is where Joseph was actually sold into slavery by his brothers. All right, verse 14. Therefore he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. The king of Syria, he sends out the troops. He pulls out all the stops. And you see that? That's a little plug. Okay, he pulls out all the stops because he sends a great army, and they're fully loaded with horses and chariots. He wants to catch this man that has made him look like very foolish and like he's had to wear egg on his face. He wants no chance of him slipping through his fingers. He doesn't want that. That man had way too much intel to let him roam the countryside. Verse 15. And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? Okay, so can you imagine when that servant opened that tent, that tent flap, and he looks out and he sees all these men and all of them surrounding him and Elijah. He knows the outcome cannot be good at all. A zillions to 2 men, just 2 men. That would make for some good odds, wouldn't it? Elijah's servant, he asked the $1 million question. What do we do? That's what he's asking. Verse 16. So he answered, this is what Elijah answers. Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. We see that it seems that Elijah, he's not rattled in one way. I had to make that. You cannot find baby rattles anywhere. I went to 7 or 8 stores yesterday. All right. He didn't seem rattled. He was really, truly, he was cool as a cucumber. That's how Elijah was. Elijah was calm. How he answers, I'm sure that servant's thinking, are you kidding me? That's all you got? Is that all you got, Elijah? We're in dire straits. Can you not see this vast army around us? But the one thing he does say in that verse is that he says that who are with us more are more than those who are with them. That's the important thing that was stated. What did Elijah mean by this? Hey, buddy, we got more on our side than they got on theirs. Trust me, or trust God. We just do. And verse 17, and Elijah prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountains was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elijah. So in this verse, we know that Elijah did not pray that God would change this current circumstances, or the situation. He prayed what? To open the servant's eyes. And Elisha knew the servant would have to see it with his own two eyes. Because seeing is a believing a lot of times for us humans. Sometimes we have to have a visual aid or two, if you get my drift. When his eyes were opened, lo and behold, he saw the reality that he could not see earlier. And yes, there were really more there than the king of the Syrian army, than the king's Syrian army. We sometimes, we have a God. We tend to put, let me do this first. Let me get this right. We put God in a box. We actually put him in a box at times. And this is what we do. We put him in there and we just say, stay put. Don't come out, Lord. Don't help me. I got this. I got this. But God's resources, if we just knew, God's resources they're not limited. They're unlimited. He's got all this power. The horses and chariots were the most sophisticated and mighty military instruments in Bible days. But the invisible army of God had more firepower than their entire men, horses, and chariots put together. The spiritual army had chariots of fire all around Elijah. He was well protected. They were well protected. Faith reveals that God does much more for his people than we can ever realize through just sight alone. As believers, we forget the firepower that we have in God through Jesus Christ. We must remember that there are spiritual resources that have been given us when we face insurmountable circumstances and difficulties in life. But through Christ, even when we can't see him, he can help us to maneuver through. These were all bought at the cross, paid for with his blood. We need to look through the eyes of faith, all right, by letting God himself show us. But we have to do our part. We have to ask. Let me read verse 18. So when the Syrians came down to him, Elijah prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people, I pray, with blindness. And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elijah. Now, mind you, the Syrian army had advanced toward them because they can't see what Elijah and the servants saw. Elijah now asked the Lord to blind them. All right. And what did God do? He answered his prayer, just like he did when he prayed to open his servant's eyes to give him the understanding and the what? The perception. And let me give you the definition of perception. The definition of perception is the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. We do have a faithful God. It may not always be in our timing, but he will answer in his timing. Verses 19 and 20. Now Elijah said to them, this is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. But he led them to Samaria. So it was when they had come to Samaria that Elijah said, Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. And the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and they were inside Samaria. When Elijah told them to follow him, he said that he would lead him. He would lead him to him. He didn't say who, but he said he'd lead him to him. No, this was not a lie. The Syrian army's intention was to stop Elijah because he kept hindering them from them getting to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel was really the one whom they were really seeking. So what Elijah did ultimately was he did bring them to the man that they were looking for. And then he asked to open their eyes. And at Elijah's command, God opened their eyes. And they would be standing right in front of him. Elijah, he does guide them and he leads them to the capital city. And that's where he asked them to open their eyes. And Elijah, let me read that verse. Let me see what verse I'm in. That they may see them. And the Lord opened their eyes and they saw, and they were inside Samaria. Wow. Surprise, surprise, like Gomer Pyle would say. I didn't do it like he does it, but anyway, they were now in the enemy's camp. Uh-oh. Goodness. That wouldn't be the place you'd want to be. That's your enemy, and you're right before him in his territory. So, all right, verse 21. Now, when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elijah, my father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them? Twice he tells him. It's an interesting piece here that we see that the king of Israel is actually asking Elijah what to do. He was going to let him make the decision. But I think it's because he realized that Elijah had followed God. He had given him, he kind of owed him, so to speak, as well. But he also knew, Elijah knew what was going on through God. And he might have led them and kept them from a lot of battle and a lot of casualties in between. So he gave that honor to Elijah to make that decision, what they were going to do. So let's see in verse 22 what he says. And he answered, you shall not kill them. Would you kill them, those whom you have taken captive with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. We see that verse okay, so Elijah said, hey, no, don't, just feed them and give them their water and then send them back to where they came, from whence they came. All right, look at verse 23. Then he prepared a great feast for them, and after they ate and drank, he sent them away, and they went to their masters. So the hands of the Syrian raiders came no more into the land of Israel. That verse I read previously about when he said, go ahead and feed them, I think that was very telling as to why the band of raiders did not come back into the land of Israel. Elijah had treated them with kindness, and I can't imagine that they would forget that so easily. How, one time, you're talking being blinded, and then your eyes are back open. Because truly, Elijah did have the power in his hand because the king gave it to him. He could have had him killed. And I want to go one step further. The Syrian army had seen 2 miracles themselves, opening and closing of their eyes. What a experience that would have been. And all because of one man's voice commanded it through God's power. I'm not sure, but if that were me, I know I would not forget it, and I know you wouldn't either. How quickly an experience like that, because I wouldn't want to go back, because you know what? He might not be in a kind mood the next time. He may have me killed the next time. Bottom line with this lesson is we see again that God is doing miracles through a man. I want to, and that how God answered and how God was with the Israelites again, even through their disobedience. I want to read you a story. It's a short story that I had read a long time ago, and I really do love it. It pertains to seeing things that you and I may not see, like in God's providential hand in it. And these soldiers, let me just say, these soldiers did not see at this, and that's what I'll read it. Just like in our Bible story that was presented today. This was a story about Raley's, R-A-L-E-Y-S, 4 men. All right. There was a story about Jewish soldiers that had gotten separated from the rest of the platoon. They were the Israelites, the Jewish soldiers. All of a sudden, a huge windstorm came along. The soldiers immediately started praying that it would stop and that they could get back to their platoon where they would be safety in numbers. But the storm only got worse. They had no choice. They had to remain at the isolated spot. When they got under cover and away from the storm, they were quite offended by God that he had not answered their prayer until they got up the next morning and went outside and found that the wind had blown so hard that it had blown the sand away from a path of landmines. Wow, isn't that a cool story? I love that story. I wonder how many delays they got delayed from getting back with their platoon, and I don't blame them. There is a power in numbers, but they were saved because God had acted. It was something they didn't want to do, but God knew best. He saw ahead of time. I wonder how many God delays that we have happened in our lives as well that have saved us. We may never know until we get to heaven. One thing you and I absolutely, one thing you absolutely don't want to ever delay is making that decision for Christ. I pray that God will open your eyes. And people, I am sorry, I have stumbled in my words, but you know what? It's done. Thank you for joining me. Let me end in prayer. Thank you for your patience. Bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for letting me get through this lesson. I thank you that you just are with us each and every time. This delay